The ballroom shimmered with gold and glass. Crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, polished marble floors. Every inch of it was perfection, and every inch of it screamed that I didn't belong. I stood behind a cracked service door, clutching a mop, watching the Ray family, my family, toast to another successful year. Cashin, my older brother, glided across the room in a navy suit, grinning like he owned the universe. Vivian, our mother, air-kissed donors while pretending to tolerate their wives. Dr. Alaric Ray, the patriarch, nodded slowly from a corner like a statue carved in arrogance. The family I was born into now treated me like a stranger who'd tracked mud into their palace. I wiped sweat from my brow, even though the ballroom air was cool and dry. It wasn't nerves. It was restraint. They raised a throne, I whispered, and made sure I'd never sit on it. I shouldn't have lingered. I should have kept moving. But then came the tray. Some overworked caterer, maybe 19, lost grip, and the crash echoed like thunder through the marble. I moved on instinct, rushed forward to help him, but the room caught me. Cashin's eyes locked on mine. A pause. Then, "Well, if it isn't our in-house sanitation expert," he said, voice dripping poison. "Guess she's here to clean up our family's messes again." Laughter spread like infection. No one stopped him, not even my parents. I stood there, mop in hand, silent, not in shame, in power. He wanted a scene. I gave him stillness. He wanted a breakdown, I thought. I gave him silence. I left before the applause ended. I didn't need to hear more. The next morning, a college friend texted me, hesitating between concern and pity. "Did you know you were cut out of the will?" What? Apparently, the family lawyer had confirmed it weeks ago. My name had been erased from the estate. No confrontation. No explanation. Just gone. I called. No answer. I drove to my mother's home. Vivian didn't come to the door. An old childhood memory floated up. Me at 6, crying because I couldn't tie my shoes. Her voice, "You were always too soft." I swallowed the ache. I won't beg for a seat at their table, I told myself. I'll build my own. Then came the article. Disgraced Ray daughter linked to company theft. Front page. Local business paper. My photo, unflattering and grainy, right under the headline. The story cited anonymous sources, claiming I'd stolen from a fund during my brief admin stint before taking the janitorial job. A blatant lie, but smartly executed. Just enough ambiguity to seem credible. I knew Cashin's style. Slippery, indirect. He never gets his hands dirty, just his underlings. I visited the journalist. He looked at me like I was a ghost. "Off the record," I said. "Who fed you the tip?" He smiled, leaned back. "You know I can't say." I did. And I also knew I couldn't sue, not yet. I needed more than truth. I needed leverage. That night, I trudged home. My apartment on South Side wasn't much, tiny, drafty, but mine. Until it wasn't. A notice hung on my door. Eviction, violation of lease terms. Unpaid fees. Property damage. What? There had been no damage. No noise. I kept to myself. The accusations were absurd. I knocked on the landlord's office. He barely looked up. "I don't know, Sarah. The file had your signature. Surveillance footage? Gone. We don't keep tapes long. Family matters always get messy." I clenched my jaw. "You're saying someone forged my name?" He shrugged. "Could be. I'm not getting involved." Cashin. Only he could reach this far, convincing, silent, devastating. I had no time to grieve the betrayal. I called an old roommate. She let me crash in her basement. No heat. One pillow. No luggage. But I had a plan forming. That night, I turned on the TV. The gala rerun played. Their faces, glowing in the spotlight, bathed in praise. They didn't mention me. Not even once. That's when it hit me. This isn't exile. It's war. Have you ever been erased by the people meant to protect you? What did you do when you realized silence wasn't enough? The funeral home smelled like fading carnations and old grief. Hyde Park's November wind had chased away the other mourners, if you could call two distant neighbors mourners. They sat stiffly, unsure whether to speak or stay quiet. I stood over Eleanor Voss's casket with dry eyes and clenched fists. She was the only person who ever looked me in the eye and saw someone worth something. There was no eulogy, no slideshow, just a silence that felt like a warning. You're the last of the good ones. Don't become them. The funeral director handed me a manila envelope. Inside, her handwriting. Sarah, you were born to lead, not serve. Don't let them define what you are. Folded behind the letter was a bundle of cash. $20,000. Crisp bills. No instructions. Just belief. Eleanor had never fought with my parents. She didn't waste time on battles she knew couldn't be won. But she fought for me in quiet gestures, in dinners dropped off at midnight, in long hugs after short visits. And now, even in death, she was still pushing me forward. The next morning, I signed a lease for a narrow storefront in Bronzeville. It used to be a dry cleaner's. I scrubbed the walls, scraped gum off the baseboards, and filled the room with machines I bought used off Craigslist. I called it Rise. I wanted it to be a new beginning. Harlan Knox showed up the second week. He wore that same smooth grin I used to fall for back in grad school when I still thought chemistry meant compatibility. He offered to co-manage the laundromat, said he had distribution connects, and could scale this into something serious. I should have known better, but Eleanor's letter had made me believe in myself again, and part of that belief bled into trusting the wrong hands. For a few weeks, we made progress. The machines hummed, customers returned, the cash box got heavier. I was even considering a second location. Then one Monday, Harlan didn't show up. Neither did the money. He took everything, cleaned out the business account. The lease was in my name. The debt, too. When the creditors came knocking, I didn't cry. I didn't curse him. I just shut the shop down, handed over the keys, and walked away. Trust, when broken twice, becomes a warning, not a wound. I tattooed that thought into the back of my mind. I moved into a tiny room above a grocery store, cleaned houses during the day, delivered food at night. Then Marisol Vega called. We had studied accounting together at community college. Now she ran 3 Latin fusion restaurants across the South Loop. She needed someone to clean her kitchens, someone she could trust not to cut corners. I know you, she said over the phone. You don't quit. I didn't. I showed up every morning at 4 a.m. sharp, scrubbed floors until they shined, reorganized inventory without being asked. I noticed which vendors arrived late, which ones cut quality. I paid attention. Marisol noticed too. One night after close, she poured me a glass of horchata and said, You don't belong in gloves forever. You got eyes like a CEO. She introduced me to her supply chain manager. I started asking questions, taking notes, watching invoices. I started side hustling, quietly cleaning for other restaurants, offering linen service, learning how to negotiate with suppliers. I read everything. Operations manuals, vendor contracts, procurement guides. I wasn't rebuilding my image. I was building a company. One night, my phone buzzed. An anonymous investor, impressed by my work through mutual connections, wanted to talk. We met at a quiet cafe, and after an hour, he promised $500,000 in seed funding to formalize my operations. This could scale fast, he said. You're solving problems no one's paying attention to. I walked home that night feeling like I could finally breathe again. 2 days later, he ghosted me. No calls, no emails. Then I got the message. A burner number. One line. Your brother moves fast. I should have known. Cashin had compiled a full dossier, false accusations, twisted records, photos taken out of context. Sent it to every potential partner I had touched base with. The branding? Subtle but there. The same formatting used by Ray legal teams. His signature poison. The silence from my inbox wasn't just disinterest. It was fear. He hadn't done this because I was failing. He did it because I was succeeding. And that terrified him. I sat at my desk in the corner of my bedroom, laptop glowing dimly. I didn't rage. I didn't even type. I just breathed. Slowly. Quietly. He still thinks I'm trying to come back, I whispered. He has no idea. I'm building something he can't control. That night, I found Eleanor's letter again. I reread it not for comfort, but for strategy. She didn't teach me how to cry. She taught me how to win, quietly. Would you still fight for your dignity if even your own blood worked to destroy it? Or would you walk away forever? The office smelled like new ink and ambition. I sat in a private corner of a luxury publishing house in Manhattan, flipping through the latest issue of Forbes. My face was on the cover. The headline read, "From Mop to Millions, the Silent Rise of Serafina Ray." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just breathed. They printed the truth, at least enough of it. My janitor uniform was a footnote now, but I remembered the fabric of that polyester collar better than I remembered my last birthday. What caught my attention wasn't my photo, but the reactions that followed. Online forums buzzed. Business podcasts debated. Comment sections filled with awe, disbelief, and more than a few conspiracy theories. Most thought the headline was poetic irony. Cashin didn't. Back in Chicago, I imagined the sound of that magazine slamming against the wall. He always reacted with force when he couldn't control the narrative. Micah called 2 hours later. "You're trending in business circles," he said. "But be careful. They don't admire what they don't understand." I already knew. Public respect was never the endgame. Leverage was. I had an appointment in 3 days with the boardroom that once erased my name. When I walked into Ray Medical Holdings' executive suite, I didn't wear designer labels. I wore silence. Vivian watched me from her place near the head of the table, arms folded like a sculpture, no longer interested in moving. Cashin sat farther down, tapping a pen in slow, rhythmic irritation. Alaric Ray, the patriarch, didn't speak. He rarely did when control slipped from his hands. I introduced myself as the CEO of Ray and Vega Logistics, their new emergency supply chain partner. Their regular vendor had folded last quarter. My company, when they didn't even know was mine, had filled in and stabilized their operations. Now they needed a contract. I presented my terms. No discounts, no advisory oversight, and an airtight non-compete clause. Cashin leaned forward. "That's aggressive," he said. I didn't blink. "That's business." Then I brought in Marisol and 3 other women, former clients, now CEOs themselves, whose logistics pipelines ran through our firm. Proof of sustainability. Proof of legacy beyond bloodlines. The board members approved. Reluctantly, but necessity doesn't ask for consent. As I stood, I met Vivian's eyes. She didn't blink either. The gala came next. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom had always belonged to the Ray family. Annual appreciation, political handshakes, staged photos of false unity. But this year, the spotlight shifted. The MC adjusted the mic. "Please welcome our strategic partner of the year, Serafina Ray, CEO of Ray and Vega Logistics." I walked up to the podium, heels quiet against the marble floor. Cashin sat at a corner table. No applause, no spotlight, no mic. I didn't speak of revenge. I spoke of resilience. My family once taught me silence. I just gave it new meaning, I said, scanning the crowd. Sometimes you're not invited to the table because you're meant to build a better one. I stepped down before the claps could rise. I didn't need their noise. Backstage, I finalized the press release. 60% of our company profits, redirected to a foundation I'd set up. It would support women thrown away by their families ignored in inheritance meetings, shut out of opportunity. I named it the Eleanor Fund. No fanfare, no press conference. I exited through the kitchen, not the lobby. In the morning, Cashin would read the release. He'd never truly understood where power lived. It wasn't in titles or legacy. It was in restraint. I opened my voicemail that night and found the message from my mother again. A soft apology. More about her pain than mine. I deleted it without listening to the end. Peace wasn't given. I had to earn it. And it's mine now. I didn't take back a seat at their table. I built my own. And I made sure it had space for the ones they tried to erase, like me. Ever walked away from everything not to run but to rise? Who did you become after they tried to silence you?